Hello, welcome to the Jason Cavness Experience. I'm your host, Jason Cavness. I'm also CEO and founder of Cavness HR. At Cavness HR, we do HR for companies with 49 or fewer people by combining our AI-enabled tech platform with an actual HR person. Our guest today is Ahmad Corner. Ahmad, thanks for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So, Ahmad, starting off, talk about some of the things you do for fun, for hobbies.
Fun hobbies. Got two kids under three now, so I don't have a lot of time for the fun and hobbies, but typically I love sports. I grew up playing football, basketball, tennis, um, boxing now, or at least recently. Well, I've been snowboarding also for the last probably 20 years of my life. I absolutely love snowboarding. I would consider that current hobby, very much current hobby, part of my lifestyle actually. Um, I've started playing pickleball, almost reluctantly. Converted from tennis. I got a lot of injuries. Hard to find tennis players at your level that are available all the time. Pickleball is just accessible, so I've been doing that a lot lately. Um, no, I think a lot of my hobbies are around just kind of being active, right? As long as I find time for it, right?
So, snowboarding, you're in the perfect place for snowboarding, right? It's
It's
not like Mexico or
nah. I mean, I don't know that I right.
Arizona.
I don't know that I would have gotten into snowboarding or become a snowboarder if I wasn't here in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Mhm.
It's I had a friend that got into it back when we were 17, 18, introduced me to it the first time I was there up at Snoqualmie Pass, actually. Fell in love. There was a period of time in my life where I was going
They scoot up just a little
I
bit.
was up to the mountain probably between 3 and 4 times every single week.
Mhm.
Um
And people don't realize how close the mountains are here to Seattle.
no, I'd get off of work, working downtown, and head to the mountain.
Mhm.
About 5 o'clock, I'd be up there before 6. I'd get enough runs in. I'd be home by 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Get up, start my day over, and do it maybe another weeknight during the week, and then I'd be up there 2 days, both days during the weekend, right? But yeah, it's Snoqualmie in particular. It's pretty accessible, right? You got other mountains around here that are hour and a half, 2 hours
Mhm.
away too, right? But yeah, we're lucky if you are into to snow sports.
See how they're doing 360 flips and all that kind of stuff like
A
that.
lot of those kind of things that I mean, in hindsight, I say I have no business doing. I still do those things every once in a while. I absolutely have no business doing. Right, like a period of time in my life where super young, no insurance, suffered a couple of injuries, head injuries. But um, no, I still love it. I think my brain tries to trick my body into believing it's
Yeah, I
still
think the older you get, the
22.
brain still tells you,
Yeah,
you're
for
young.
sure. It's
But the
tough.
body says not so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. I deal with that every day.
Yeah, hear that crack or
Hey,
what it is. Like,
yeah, yep,
oh, that didn't feel like.
yeah. Feels like an old knee. Yeah, sure. Um,
So, did you start off skiing or you always just straight up
no, I've
snowboarding?
never skied in my life.
Okay.
Never. A ski has never touched my foot.
Hmm.
So it's been snowboarding from the very, very beginning.
Pickleball. That's one thing I still haven't figured out right. Like, I used to play tennis way back in the day. I used to
Okay.
have a lot of fun playing tennis. I ain't played probably 20, 30 years. To me, tennis, you want to work out, if you play with like someone like matches your skill, it's a really good workout, right?
Absolutely.
But my thing is, my age, maybe your age, like that's a little twist of the knee, the ACL's gone, right?
Yeah.
So tennis might be the best thing, when you get older.
Yeah. I mean, tennis. So my dad's is still a tennis coach, um, trainer. In the 70s. He was a professional tennis player, and I mean, he is deeply involved in the game. So obviously, I had a lot of coaching, a lot of lessons, tournaments growing up. Um, I still love the game. It's just, like I said before, it's not as accessible as something like pickleball. For me, time is fairly limited, right? Being an entrepreneur, two very young kids, if I can get out the house and do something, like, great. Um, Not easy to coordinate schedules, find people that are, playing tennis, similar level to me, open court. Um, Not as easy as I'd like. So yeah, but we actually started playing. I got a group of friends that I went to high school with. That one of my buddies lives down right off of Rainier Avenue South, and there's a park near his house, and apparently there's a pretty new pickleball court. So we shot a text in the group thread saying, "Hey, we got a new pickleball court here. We should start playing." And I don't think a lot of people took them seriously, but I kind of did. I remember playing pickleball in PE high school. And I was like, that was fun. And again, being somebody that's into the paddle or racket sports, I was excited about it. So there was a small group of us, four of us, that started playing really early in the morning, intentionally started playing at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays. One, to help us get out the house, but two, we wanted to get there early so we didn't embarrass ourselves in front of other people that were good. So we made it kind of a routine. Saturday morning pickleball, 7 o'clock in the morning, out on Rainer Avenue South. The experienced pickleball players started showing up around 9. So then, we got the courage up to start playing with them, realizing that, oh, I actually have some tangible pickleball skills from my tennis experience, right? Um, that was last summer. So we've been playing fairly consistently for about a year.
So how different is pickleball from like regular tennis? It's pretty. Is this the courts different or something, or
I
different
mean,
rules?
courts different, paddles different, rules somewhat similar, right? Like, again, if you grew up playing tennis, pickleball comes pretty easily. I think there's a lot of pickleball players that acknowledge that when they see an ex-tennis player.
And wasn't that actually invented here in the state of Washington?
Apparently, it was. I think Bainbridge Island. I might be wrong there, but
Yeah,
I mean, I know for a fact it was Washington. I think it's Bainbridge Island.
Bainbridge. Yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds right.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm not like I don't
You're
want
not
to
going to
say
the
I'm.
Olympics in
Nah,
2024 or
I'm not. I
2028
just it's
for
it
Olympics
keeps
for
me
pickle.
active. It's a way to get out of the house and hang out with my guys once a week
That's
at least.
important too. When you get up in age, like you got to exercise something, right? It doesn't matter what you do, just do something, right? It could be like martial arts or running or
Precisely,
something. Yeah,
precisely. Yeah, I mean, that's one of those. And like somebody who grew up extraordinarily active, right? Like I consider myself an athletic athlete. Played multiple sports my entire life. Um, losing that part of me just because of age and inconvenience of getting out of the house and finding something to do is tough, right? So it's like I've got to find a way to integrate some sort of activity into my life, right? Like pickleball kind of has become that, right? Snowboarding stuff, right? Um, it's small window of time during the year. You got to pack a bunch of stuff. You got to, get out to the mountains.
I'm guessing not
45 minutes.
cheap to buy a ticket when
No,
you're.
I mean, and then it's, seasons past, usually what I do because it's, it makes the most sense considering how often I'd like to go. But
Yeah,
then it's like with the kids, right? Like it's tough for me to justify getting out of the house and being gone for
yeah.
5 hours a day.
And plus, I mean, that's a good thing with snowboarding is like you do it by yourself, or you don't need a team. You just go and go do it, right? And the snowboard is that kind of like is that kind of like your mental health thing to like kind of therapeutic for you, like on the mountain by yourself or nature?
Absolutely. Just throw in my headphones. I mean, this is, snowboarding is social, generally speaking, for most people, right? Like oftentimes people go up with, a friend or snowboarding buddy or ski buddy or whatever, or a group of people. But you get to a certain level where, it becomes part of what
Mhm.
you do, where you oftentimes just go by yourself, right? Wake up, like, I'm just gonna go up to the mountain for a little
Yeah.
bit, I'll be gone for, 3, 4, 5 hours and come back, right? So I was definitely at that point where, I would say half the time I was in the mountain, it was just kind of a solo trip, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, a good little escape. Again, throw on your headphones. There's the exercise, there's nature. It's great, right? Like there's athletic challenge for me. I was a terrain park junkie, right? Like way more than I needed to be. Again, I wasn't going to the Olympics or anything, but like I snowboarded competitively. Like I competed, in slope style, right? So again, like flips and 360s and other spins and shit like
It's
that,
good
right?
also.
Little closer, stuff like that. Um,
And so it's mainly like the main way you take care of yourself, so to speak.
I mean, it was for a while. Now it's a lot of it's pickleball. It's Peloton, which sometimes I hate to admit because I don't enjoy running. I don't enjoy spin or cycling necessarily. For me, it's kind of
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's boring, but it's kind of boring, right? Like it's
Yeah.
for me.
I
I'm
guess
not.
the commercial like, let's go, let's go. I'm like,
Yeah,
to me, I never did it. Like I'm talking about you on a bike, some video lady like telling you,
yeah.
let's go.
It's for
That seems
me,
so
like,
like
yeah,
fake to
I'm
me.
I'm competitive, so like there's a leaderboard that's
Mhm.
attached to it. So for me, like I watch myself
Yeah.
move past people, or like I find somebody who looks like they're moving pretty well and try to like track with that person.
Yeah.
So that's what keeps me moving, and also the idea that like I'm actually
Yeah.
doing something active that's good for me, right?
Yeah.
Like I gotta make sure that like I include that into my daily routine. It's I think particularly COVID, the whole shutdown, right? Like really reminded me that how easy it is to get to move and how important it is to your body, right? Like, atrophy can really set in pretty quick, right? And that's not something I wanted for myself. So like, I
Yeah.
kind of forced these things, these habits that maybe aren't entirely enjoyable, like the spin thing,
Yeah.
into my routine. Um, right, because there's a lot of activities that I do truly love that are good for me, like snowboarding, right?
Yeah.
But those aren't always as accessible, right? Like
Yeah.
it takes a little more time away from the day. But if I can get on a bike for 30 minutes, cool. At least I did something.
Yeah.
But then pickleball is one of those things. Like I get
Yeah.
out the house, I can move
Yeah.
around.
Yeah. Good point. People don't realize how much cardio like snowboarding and skiing actually is, right?
Man,
It's a
yeah.
workout.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me, it's, I've been snowboarding for decades, but, like, it's always a good reminder. My first day up on the mountain after, a
You're like,
season
oh
off or
shit,
something, I was like,
I'm kind of out of shape right now.
"Shit, yeah, this is hard." Yeah, I actually need to get in shape to do this. I can't
Yeah.
just, it's definitely a workout. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So next, you actually um became involved in Mercy House.
Yeah, so, yeah, I'm on the, board of directors of Mercy Housing. That's recent. Feel like I'm still learning the ropes. Really, really great organization. Obviously, I don't know if I would have joined the board if it wasn't, but like I fully believe in the work they do, the team that they have there. Yeah, I mean, I committed myself at one point shortly after having my first kid that like I can only really take on projects that I was passionate about. I'm kind of a yes person. I'm also I'd like to see myself as a. Go ahead.
Same here. Yes,
You too?
person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, as a
I got to
a
learn to say
a
no more.
problem solver too. It's like okay, you need some help. I want to jump all the way in, right? Like I want to jump in and fix it. Like
And so
really
you're
start
like
like
board of directors, board of advisors.
board of directors. Yeah.
Okay. And they reach out to you for this, or you reach out to
Yeah.
them?
I had a well. I actually had there's somebody who works for the organization that mentioned that I've worked with on some projects before, and somebody I consider a friend as well, who mentioned to me that Mercy Housing was looking to expand their board and thought that I would be a really good candidate. And I'd already known of Mercy, um, even prior to her experience, being at Mercy. But like once she started working at Mercy, I was really good picture of the work they did, appreciative of the kind of work or whatever. So once she mentioned, I was like, that's definitely interesting to me, right? Like something that like I think I would love to be able to support. And I'd also kind of pulled a lot of my focus away from serving a lot of the clients that I was doing work for, focusing more so on things that were um, being really intentional. I was focusing on being intentional with my time
Mhm.
at that moment too, and Mercy Housing, that opportunity really I think fit in with things that are important to me too.
And so what do they expect you from you as being on the board? Like expect you like to put the word out about them, how their branding, how they happen to fundraising, like what do they expect from you?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, boards are. I mean, there are similarities between boards, right? I mean, at Mercy Housing in particular, we've got quarterly board meetings. Expectations really are is you are in large part the advisory team to the leadership of the organization, right? It's in the nonprofit space. It's ideal to have a team of experts to act as kind of a I don't want to say a review board, right? Like effectively, the board of directors is the act as the boss to the executive team of nonprofit organizations, right? But like they need to be people that are passionate about the mission of the organization, about growth of the organization. Oftentimes it's beneficial if they're well networked. It can act as which they can the board members network can be an additive to the work that the nonprofit organizations doing, right? Again, it's kind of case by case basis with nonprofit organizations, right? What they're looking for and what you're really asked to do. Some boards have what's called a give or get, which minimum requirement is that you give a certain amount of money on an annual basis to the nonprofit organization, or you find ways to fundraise a certain dollar value. That's not all boards. That's but yeah, I mean, so far, like it's been less than a year. I joined the board earlier this year, but it's been great. It's been exciting watching the work that they do. Really being able to look under the hood of a national nonprofit organization. How they operate, um, growth potential, the communities, the individuals, the markets they serve. it's yeah, it's an exciting experience.
And how long have you been with them?
Earlier this year, so I joined officially, I think, the end of spring, so a little bit before summer.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the next question might be unfair to ask you, but ask anyway, right? So like I'm very critical of a lot of the nonprofits here in Seattle, right?
Yeah, sure.
Because like there's all these nonprofits, and you always hear in the news, Amazon, Microsoft, other companies giving millions and millions of dollars,
Mhm,
and like it seems like nothing ever gets better, right? Like it's like the stats are the same, you see the same people, right?
mhm.
Like what does Mercy House do better than other people, right? Like why pick Mercy House? What makes you know that they're actually gonna walk the walk, talk the talk, so to speak, right? Which so many people don't.
Well, one, I mean, I think it's, I guess, maybe a tough question to answer without getting into like the details of,
Hmm.
how money is spent
Hmm.
and the results of money, right? But like one thing about nonprofits, it's, dollars in, dollars out. It's all public information, right? Like you can see how money's spent. They spend a good percentage of their dollars. One, I should mention about Mercy Housing, what's really great about them too, they don't rely solely or even, a big percentage of their revenue isn't tied to grants or fundraising, right? Like they actually have a business model, right? They're building buildings, they're managing buildings, right? Low income housing, right? So they're going out and bidding for contracts,
So like
with
what's
other.
what's y'all's like success metric, right? Like in the fiscal year, calendar year, how does Mercy House say, okay, we were successful? Like this is like number of houses built,
Mhm.
number of people homed. Like
Yeah, so
I
like
think a lot of these nonprofits don't have that.
sure, well they definitely do, and I feel like that maybe is something that like I would defer to the leadership team,
Okay.
kind of define what those success metrics are. Like again, I'm still kind of onboarding,
Yeah.
and getting an understanding of the things that are a priority with in relation to the organization's growth. Um, but I can say, like, it's not simply about building houses, and really what was important to me is like the wraparound service that they have within. And it's not even necessarily houses, more so properties or buildings that they build, right? It's the wraparound service that they have. They provide, education to and tutoring, mentorship to the kids that live on the property, right? Like they provide, um, like a whole bunch of activities, um, resources to the individuals that are there, which is something different than I've seen in other
Mhm.
organizations that do affordable housing, right? So it wasn't just about affordable housing; it was more
Okay.
so about the services that are
And
provided
y'all have
by
like a
Mercy Housing.
niche y'all serve too, right? Like you don't serve everybody. Can you talk about like the demographic you serve?
That's something that I'm still kind of wrapping my head around
Okay.
too, right? But like it really is about, I mean, it's as a baseline, it's kind of affordable housing,
Yeah.
right? Like individuals that need access to that kind of
Yeah.
resource, right? Like, housing is an absolutely important resource for everybody, and not everybody has the same ability to. Um,
Yeah. So my cousin, a lot of these nonprofits, I'll give an example.
mm,
So like a lot of them, that's my perception. They just like they're in business to be a nonprofit just make money, right? Or for example, there's a nonprofit in the building. I won't say
mm,
the name. And so like I've been in this business like since March of 2023.
mm,
About a month in, I heard these two people talking outside, right? And this
mm,
one lady said, "Hey, I'm really proud of Steve. He's been with us 9 years." I'm thinking to myself, he's been through 9 years. Like,
mm.
how is that a success, right? Shouldn't like after 9 years, shouldn't he be like doing something better, right? Like if he's with your thing for 9 years,
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like, how do you define better, right?
yeah.
Like, people join companies or look for employment for various reasons,
For
right?
example, if someone joins, like if you have somebody on Mercy Housing
Mhm.
and after 9 years they're still homeless, and you say he's with a program,
Oh, you talk. Okay, sorry, I thought you were talking about an employee. You're talking about
yeah,
somebody who's receiving
yeah,
services. Yeah,
using their services, and they're what I heard in the conversation, that this person is in the same place after 9 years, right?
right,
I'm thinking
right.
to myself, how's that good, right? Like,
No, I understand that. I do understand that, right? Like I think I can't remember who said it, and I'm not going to say it nearly as well as the person who did say it too. But the very existence, oftentimes, of nonprofits, um, are to do work to put yourself out of a job, right? If your
yeah,
nonprofit is operating effectively, like you should have no more work to do at a certain period of time,
yeah.
right? Like, but there are, there are variables that like aren't controlled
And of
by
course, some people
government,
say
right?
that the work will never be done. There'll
Sure,
always be poor people, be homeless people, always be, whatever your nonprofit does, they will always be around.
sure. Yeah, I mean, there's unfortunately, I mean, I don't see an end for the need of affordable housing,
Mhm,
right? There are other market variables that, aren't clearly controlled by that nonprofit that contribute to the need
mhm.
for housing. for individuals who might not be able to afford the markets they live in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the unfortunate reality. So until that problem solved, like Mercy Housing and the other affordable housing organizations are going to continue to exist, right? And continue to need resources to house the individuals that need, right? Like, um, it's again, I think in a perfect world, nonprofits wouldn't have to exist, right?
Yeah.
Right, but we're far from that.
Let me ask you this. Like, I'm going to make this number up. Totally make this up. Like, suppose
Mm-hmm.
there's like 20 nonprofits in Seattle doing what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it better for them, these 20 different nonprofits, like do their own individual work, solving the same problem? Or should they like kind of like combine
Yeah,
forces?
I
Or is
mean,
that more like ego, the executive director saying, no, this is my thing?
there's a lot of ego out there. Like I'm answering this as myself, Ahmad Corner, not on behalf of any organization, but like I always feel like it's way better to partner, right? Like identify individuals that are doing or are capable of doing great work, the work that overlaps or aligns with the work you're doing, and find a way to work together, right? I don't see a lot of value in competition in the space of social impact, right, or nonprofit work. Um, I see health and collaboration, right? I've also seen a lot of ego, and this is not just nonprofit space, right? Like this is humanity in general, right? Which permeates for profit and nonprofit, right? Um, which creates, in my opinion, particularly in the nonprofit space, unnecessary competition, right? So yeah, I mean, if you're asking me, there's 4 or 5 nonprofits that are doing the exact same thing. Like, is your work repetitive, right? Are you competing for the same dollars to do the same thing in the same neighborhoods for the same people? Is that beneficial to those people, right? Is
Yeah.
that beneficial to your mission? I mean, I don't know that it is. Again, that's me speaking for myself, and
Mhm.
not anybody else. But I really think, generally speaking, people need to find ways to work together,
Yeah. I know,
right?
like, I retired from the Army, and there's so many fucking Army nonprofits, right? It's
Hmm.
ridiculous, right? So many veteran nonprofits. It's like literally hundreds of thousands, right?
Sure, sure.
And for perfect example, at JBLM down by Fort Lewis, um, there's 3 nonprofits, right?
Yeah.
One is deep sea fishing,
Okay.
one is fishing on a lake, and one is river fishing,
Okay.
and they refuse to work together.
That's an ego thing?
It's
It
insane,
sounds
right?
like,
Like,
right? Like I don't.
it's
Yeah.
fishing, right? Like,
Right.
and yeah, they like some. My thing is like, okay, are you really for veterans, or you just want this nonprofit to pay your salary and say I'm the executive director or something, right?
There's a thing in entrepreneurship or the startup world called founder syndrome, right? And I do think that it's human personality driven, right? It's ego driven, right? Like your decisions are influenced by your own personal bias. It's not necessarily the success or the impact of your company or your nonprofit organization, right? Which I think creates the kind of maybe the competitiveness that you're seeing with those 3 organizations down there, right? Where it's what are you designed to do, right? Like what is your purpose? What is your end goal, right? Like how do you measure success? I think you asked that question earlier, right? Like it is that going to be limited by not working with somebody else, right? Is there a reason why you two can't work together? Is it a personal thing? Is it because I want to see the success of my organization as the purveyor of this service in this area, which means I've got to box everybody else out, right? But like to what detriment, right? To the communities or the people that you're intending to serve. I think that it needs to be looked at, right? Like I don't think you get into the nonprofit space without submitting to the idea that your wants, your personal wants aren't necessarily important, right? It's the needs of the individuals or the communities or the audience that you're designed to serve is what's most important always. And that's a hard thing to do, right? Like I think human nature oftentimes, dictates our action, um, our habits, and unfortunately, sometimes for the worse, right? Again, I think that really permeates oftentimes nonprofits, for profits, well, right? Even personal relationships, it does.
So how do you do this, right? I think it's a trick situation.
Mhm.
Like, suppose you have a success story, you put a family in housing, but how do you like take advantage, right? Like, how do you showcase that out? Because I'm thinking there's privacy concerns. We can't put like the Bob Jones family on social media to show, hey, they went from homeless to being a house, right?
Mhm.
So how do you like take advantage of your success stories to like how being a fundraiser? Like, hey, we're doing the good work, right?
That's
Without
yeah.
the privacy aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's more of a marketing thing, right?
Mm.
Like, than even in nonprofit space, right? Like, I mean, I think any company, for profit, nonprofit, wants to be able to share in their successes, and sometimes their successes are tied to the individuals that are either purchasing the product or recipients of the services you provide. That's probably a case by case basis, right? Like, again, I can't speak for Mercy Housing exactly how they do it. Again, I'm still kind of learning and getting uh, uh, the opportunity to continue to look under the hood and figure out some of those things, right? And part of that is, a responsibility as a board member is to be able to lend my expertise to be able to do things better, right? I'm still in the learning phase there, right? So as far as specifics around sharing success stories, like that is something that I think that falls kind of within my wheelhouse. And there's always privacy issues, right? Privacy issues are you overcome those issues with consent. Clearly, there's a bit of a process around consent, and then the work that needs to be done in order to share that kind of stuff, right? But I think it's really kind of a case by case basis.
And so by joining the board of directors, do you have any personal goals or like business goals or being on board of directors?
No, I mean not like I feel that if you're joining a board of directors for a nonprofit organization, you kind of have to remove all you know personal ambition or
Mm.
business ambition. That's
If
not
only everyone thought like that.
right. Like, I mean, sure, right. Again, like that's what I'm saying. Like, I think naturally there's like this human ego element that says, like, survival instinct, right? I got to look out for myself first, right? I really think that to be an effective board member, like you are there to help that organization serve their mission in the most effective way possible, right? And you really have to kind of think of it like that in every bit of work you do for them. So for me, like I don't see any, personal benefit outside of, being able to help them serve things that I care about, right? Um,
Let me ask you
for
this.
me,
Like
yeah,
suppose you've been on the board like for say 2 years.
yeah.
In 2 years, let's say um, you gave like advice on 20 different things, right?
Mhm.
And all 20 times they ignored your advice.
Sure.
Like, are you gonna like, keep on being on the board? You were like, man, you don't like, at least throw me a bone once in a while. I can know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Or
Well, I mean, I think most people, and I'm going to speak for myself, you join a board because you care already about the work that they're doing or they're designed to do, right? Not so much that you care about them listening to you and doing the
Mhm.
things that you want them to do, right? So I think, obviously I haven't been there 2 years. Like that's not my story. That's not my experience, right? Like that, like been advising things, they're not doing it, right? I don't think that's necessarily a a something that's specific to nonprofits, right? Like a lot of the work I do professionally is consulting, right? And one thing that you, as a consultant, always have to remind yourself is this is not my business.
Mhm.
The best I can do is advise, steer them on the right path. If they're not doing that, that's their business. I can't take that person, right? Oftentimes as a consultant or as an advisor of a company, as a paid consultant or a paid advisor of a company, their ability to pay for the work that you do for them is going to be tied to the revenue they're able to produce, right? So if they're not producing revenue and they're not listening to you, they're not going to pay you, then you're not going to have a consulting relationship anyways, right? So it's, I think you have to walk into situations where you're a board member, you're an advisor, you're a consultant, and understand that like you are there to provide expertise in areas that you know well. It's on them to be able to interpret and take action. They can make those decisions. That's not my decision.
So before we move on, anything else you want to talk about as far as Mercy House? What you guys have anything going on in the future? Any events or anything we want people to know about?
No, I mean they just wrapped up a pretty big event called Power of Home. They do on an annual basis. Again, like I said, like I'm still learning. There's a lot of stuff happening. There's properties that are being opened. I work particularly with the team called Mercy Housing Northwest. Um, but it's a national organization. There's a lot of great things happening, right? But yeah, nothing that I'm super aware of at the moment. But again, talk to me this time next year. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of stuff I can talk to you about.
All right, moving on. How did you become involved with tech startups?
Hmm. I became involved in tech startups. That's an interesting question. Um, Kind of a windy road. My whole career path is a weird windy road. I started working for a tech company quite a while ago. Um, Before that, I had launched an organization called Young Professionals of Seattle. Through that work, naturally curious. I say the work with Young Professionals of Seattle being, naturally curious. Um, would continuously conduct surveys from, people participating, individuals, and then companies that were looking to sponsor to try to figure out what was important, what was interesting, why do you want to sponsor, where do you expect your dollars to go through, like what are the results that you're looking for. In doing so, I found a couple of commonalities between companies that are looking to give money, to give dollars. A lot of them are around like marketing and or hiring, really in identifying a particular audience, and I mean, carving a path for spending and or employment for those audience members. Um, Now, with the young professional organization, I was very protective of the individuals who were willingly giving us their email addresses because they wanted to be included in any of the events
People
that
don't
we
realize
do.
how hard that is to get somebody's email address.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It takes work, but for me, I was like, okay, like, well, like they're signing up for this. They're not necessarily signing up for like this corporate integration
Mm.
necessarily, right? Like, so let's find out exactly like what they want. Like, if there's a way to kind of connect the dots with the companies, we will, right? So I realized that companies wanted to sponsor oftentimes. Like, I didn't necessarily see what the data, the information that we had through some surveying that like companies, their ambitions were a match for the needs of the individuals that are joining our organization. So we would at a certain point have to say no, sorry, like I don't know this is a good fit for this community that you're trying to reach, but I can help you create your own campaign to reach them on your own, right? If you're not going to do it through our brand, you can do it through your own brand. So while I was working at this tech company, it's a publicly traded company now. At the time, it wasn't. It was way smaller. I started pretty early there. Um, you know, Wore multiple hats there, but like while I was working at that company, I was doing a lot of work with companies, and without knowing it, I was consulting and advising on how to deliver, how to identify, an audience member, how to deliver messaging, how to, tailor a brand for the impact or the results that you're looking for from that audience, right? So I actually started getting hired to do that kind of work. So that's where like my consulting started. Same time, I mean, Seattle being a fairly tech heavy city, very, tech centric here. There were things like Startup Week, Startup Weekend that were happening throughout the community. I was, just interested in general, right? Just working in tech and working with a lot of companies, right? Like there were startups, relatively new tech companies in the Seattle area that were reaching out, trying to access young professionals of Seattle, network. Realizing that, like, I was consulting and advising, you know, smaller companies, but also some more established companies. And that my advice had value. It was kind of interesting to me. So like I really started getting excited about more so helping the smaller companies grow, right? Like leveraging the work that I've done for some of the bigger companies and stuff, consulting and doing it to kind of create like, larger impact for kind of the underdog, right? Like I'm always kind of a fan of the underdog. So I started getting involved in, things like, Seattle Startup Week. I started being connected with entrepreneurs in the city. I started just being referred by my contacts that I picked up through a lot of that work to, these startups that were newly funded, that were looking to grow, like looking to identify an audience, looking to like generate revenue or create revenue models. So I was kind of, learning as I went, but realizing that like I had a skill set that I didn't go to school for, um, that was relevant to the startup community. So again, like for me, I think being again kind of a fan of the underdog, right? Like that, like energetic new founder with a really good idea, that just maybe needed some guidance, advice, a little perspective that maybe they didn't have time or the network to provide for them. I could kind of jump in and do you know have the conversations that I knew well enough that became something I did on a recurring basis, right? Startups didn't really pay the bills. It was more of a hobby, right? But like, there were bigger companies that like, I would consult that actually had financial means to be able to pay, for the work that I did. So like, I found myself, working with startups as more of a hobby, right? Like something that I actually cared about, like something that I was more passionate about than the big companies. big companies pay the bills.
Is Seattle Star Week still a thing? Like, I know they canceled during COVID. But has it been back since then?
No, this is a long story, and I
'Cause I know that there was run by Techstars. I think
yeah,
Techstars shut down.
it was run by Techstars.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't want to get into too much detail there. There are a lot of people I think in the Seattle area that are not happy with how that was handled.
yeah, it was pretty fucked up.
It's a great event in the Seattle area,
Yeah,
right? Like, and I think very much needed. And yeah, I don't know. I think there have been ideas of a recreation of something
it's just
similar.
a matter no one's actually stepped up and took charge. Like, we're whatever you are,
Yeah,
and said we're going to run Seattle Star
from
Week.
my understanding, Techstars tried to do it, but they tried to do it remotely, right? Like they tried to, and I do think that was a mistake. They tried to, and I don't know if it was, remember if it was like right before COVID happened or during COVID. I think it was maybe right before COVID happened. They tried to pull same event off remotely
Yeah,
without leveraging
that's
community
tough.
members, the people in
That's
the
tough.
community that care and that were passionate about tech. And I don't think it went well. I think you add COVID on top of that. It was kind of a recipe for disaster, in which there are a lot of, I guess, ideas or opinions on why it doesn't exist in the same capacity, right? But I don't think that helped at all.
No, it doesn't.
Um,
No. And 4 years
yeah,
later, still no Seattle Star Week.
yeah. I mean, I think the event space has taken a significant hit,
Yeah,
particularly in Seattle, right? A lot of the events were designed around the reality that people lived and or worked around the downtown area,
yeah.
right? COVID changed that tremendously. Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of return to work initiatives that are happening. So we might see a version of what existed pre-COVID, as far as the event space, right? But like, I mean,
Yeah, I know pre-COVID they would have like stuff at Galvanize,
mhm,
Startup Hall, like all over the place, right? I don't think you do that. I think if you do it again, I think you have to be in one location. I
yeah,
don't
it's
think you
tough,
have every. You have to be in
tough,
one location. I
right?
think.
It's tough. I mean, I don't know that the I say the downtown Seattle community returns to exactly what it was. Maybe it does. I don't know. We'll see what happens, right? Amazon's pulling all their employees back to the office. A lot of companies follow what Amazon does,
Yeah,
right? There might be a bit of a revival in the downtown area, right? Which means that you'll see a lot of post work hour events happening. We'll see. I don't know. Yeah, I think people got really used to operating in this
I
virtual
mean that's
world.
definitely an interesting experiment. I think because Amazon
Mhm,
making everyone go work, or
mhm,
Microsoft is still letting people stay at home, and I think Microsoft said we're gonna you can stay at home as long as the productivity stays the same. But what does that mean? Who knows, right? I
yeah,
definitely think it's
right.
an interesting experiment between those two big companies.
I've spoken with a couple or quite a few executives, particularly through the pandemic, who were very anxious to get employees back into the office for
Especially you,
reasons
yeah,
that weren't
especially
even related to revenue, right? Like there are a lot of tech
exactly.
companies particularly that were doing extraordinarily well with remote employees,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Which means that like they're being productive, right? Like you can be productive and do extraordinarily well without people having to report to the office. But I don't know that I mean, there are probably a lot
Yeah,
of
like where do
reasons,
these
right?
stats come from? It's like people start like, I work for Amazon, I self-report I'm more productive. Like
Mhm.
where do these stats come from, right? Obviously, if you're an employee, self-report, you're more productive, right?
Sure,
So where do these
sure,
stats come from? That's
sure.
always been my question.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's tough, right? Like,
And then if you're like the Mirror Seattle, Mirror Bellevue, obviously you want Amazon and the big companies to be downtown, right? It's like a union, man, like all the companies down the restaurants probably like sucking the wind, like, they need that
yeah,
foot traffic.
they rely heavily on the foot traffic, right? And it's not traffic necessarily people that live there. It's people that work
Yeah.
down there. Like they rely on happy hour traffic, right?
Yeah. Let's
Or
have a hey
lunchtime
team, let's
traffic,
have a
right?
drink after work at so and so.
Yeah, 100%, right? So I mean, obviously, you saw a lot of businesses shut down, during COVID, but like a lot of them haven't opened back up, right? Because they don't have that kind of traffic that existed pre-COVID, right? Like, we'll see. Might change when
Yeah.
people start
I'm
returning
just
back to
interested to
work
see how it
again.
works out.
Yeah,
And this, like, I'll probably get blasted for this,
yeah,
but I really have no empathy for the people working at Amazon, right? That's to make the six figures. So, like, you hear all these people like striking, making us go back to work.
sure,
Like, you're making
sure,
six figures, you got a nice stock, right? I can understand if you made minimum wage.
sure,
I understand if you make federal minimum wage, 75 an hour, you got to drive 2 hours to work some fast food job. I
sure,
get it, but
sure,
you're not making peanuts, right? So I
sure,
really have no sympathy for them.
sure. I mean, you also kind of consider, cost of living here. There are Amazon employees who don't make a lot of money, right? Like, you got to
Yeah.
think of even people that work security,
Yeah, I'm not
and
talking
some of
about
those
them. I'm
folks.
talking
So
about,
of course,
the
yeah,
program
for
manager, HR
sure,
business
for
partner.
sure, for sure. I mean, and I also think that like I don't know. I think there's this kind of battle. Like I think this is a constant battle between like employee and employer,
Mhm.
right? Like we're gonna do what you say because you want us to do it, but why do we need to do it, right? Like
Yeah.
you see these strikes with
Yeah.
Boeing and all these other things, But I mean, I think those are battles that will continue to exist. But and I do think there's this kind of perspective with some of the tech employees where like we're as productive working from home.
Yeah.
Why are you
But are
making us come
you?
to the office?
But are you?
I think I honestly think it depends on the person.
Like me,
Yeah,
I can't work from home.
yeah,
Like
you can't.
I
Okay,
can't. Like
yeah,
I know that, right? Like now, don't be wrong. Do I want to drive 2 hours and a half and be in a cubicle from eight to
yeah,
five?
yeah,
No, I don't.
yeah,
Right? Like, but I
sure,
need some place to go.
yeah.
If I'm at home, I'm eating like 20 snacks.
That's
I'll just watch an episode of Young Sheldon.
sure. No,
Next thing
no.
I'm known, I'm watching some kind of freaking cat video.
That's fair, and I've seen. I think
And most people
there's
are not
a
honest like
period
that.
of time where I was just kind of hardline, and I was like, people can be way more productive from home than in the office, right? Now we're kind of realizing. I think everybody's had the opportunity to work
Yeah.
from home. Not, I shouldn't say everybody, right? Like I'm speaking from a perspective of privilege in a city that's heavily tech focused, right, where a lot of people can work from home. There are some people that aren't as productive at home.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that aren't as
There's a
productive.
lot of
Like I find
distractions.
myself that like I can be
But
productive at
chase a lot
home
of distractions at home.
depending on the distractions that
And
you
there's
have.
distractions at work too,
Right.
though.
I think what I found for myself, and this is pre-pandemic, right? Like I can oftentimes work from home and be far more productive than I was in the office, right? Like when I was in the office, I've got people coming up to me and asking me questions. I've got meetings with people coming up and asking if I want to do coffee, right? Right. And if
Yeah.
I'm at home,
How the
you know,
Seahawks do?
sure, right? Like and that's I think that there's value in being able to work at the office, right?
Yeah.
Like the ability to be able to collaborate in person, right? Like the bond that you create with team members that are going through the same thing at the same time in a work environment, right? Like I think there's value. There's absolutely value there. But like in working from home, I found that like, you know, I also find that I work more or longer days from home than I did actually in the office, right? Because like, there are going to be those distractions, right? Like I
Yeah.
got, ESPN in the background, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm watching some stuff or like do laundry real quick or
So
I'm
I'll push
walking.
back a little bit.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people say they work longer hours.
Yeah.
I think a lot of them like they think they work longer hours, but like because they work at home, they can go, to a store from 1 to 3 p.m.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah. I wasn't saying like make the distinction.
and then they work 5 to 7
Yeah.
or I work to 7.
Yeah.
Did he really work to
No, that's what
7?
I'm saying. Like I'll make the I gotta maybe clarify. Like, not saying they work more hours necessarily, but like longer hours,
Oh,
right?
gosh,
Like
okay.
I would wake up and like check my email, then I go on my phone, then I'm like I'll go get coffee, and then I'll hang out, I'll watch a show, and be slightly distracted as I'm doing some work. But like I think what's most relevant and what should be cared most about is productivity, right? Like, are you getting the job done, right? Like it doesn't matter if it takes you 5 hours or 10 hours. Are you able to do it, right?
And how many
Taking
people do this, right?
yeah,
Give me this the worst case scenario. Like suppose there's an employer, right?
hmm
And during the day, they're like from 10 to 12, they're doing like something non-work related. 1 to 3 is something more non-work
hmm
related. And then at 5 o'clock, the boss calls and say, I need something to do for me. And no, I get up for 5.
nah,
Like you just like spend 4 hours a day, like, doing personal
yeah.
stuff. Like,
Well, I think two things in that scenario. I don't know that there are a lot of bosses that would call at 5 and say I need you to do something. I think
mm,
more so the expectation is set is that like there are things that need to be done,
yeah.
and they're not necessarily like things that need to be done by the end of the day. It's just like you have things that need to be done. Some of them
Hmm.
need to be done by the end of this day. Some of them need to be
Yeah.
done by tomorrow or next week, and it's on you. Like for me, um, you know, my management style is, I don't have time or energy to micromanage.
Yeah.
I don't think you want me to micromanage you. You're an adult, and the fact that you were hired and I gave my recommendation to hire you means that I trust you to do the job that we're hiring you.
But do you think there's people out there who actually do like, like my day ends at 5 o'clock. I might like fuck around in the daytime and like do my own stuff.
Yeah.
But 5 o'clock's here, I'm not doing anything else.
Yeah, of course there's people like that. I think, yeah, there's always going to be people like that, that try to, I mean, do the least amount, and still keep a job, right? I think sometimes that ends up showing, right? Like, there's going to be without getting too deep into this, right? Because I mean, I think this can be a very subjective conversation, right? Like, but like, I think work performance is going to show over time,
Yeah, I
right?
agree with that.
And it's you were hired to do a job, and say you're in an environment where you have free reign. We're not going to tell you exactly how it needs to get done. You decide how it gets done as long as it gets done, right? Like if you're being productive, I don't think most companies care
They
so
don't.
much
Yeah,
on how you're doing it, right? But if you're just like, oh, I didn't get this done, this falls within the responsibility of my job that I was hired for. I didn't get it done, and you're asking me to get it done, and I'm saying I'm not going to do it because it's five. Like that's going to reflect poorly on you, right?
I agree. Another thing too, these Amazon employees, like to me, they should have seen it right on the wall, right? Because first, I'm fully remote. I think maybe a year ago they changed it 3 days a week to come in
Mhm.
there, right? So to me, the writing's on the wall, right?
Sure,
Like it's
sure. I think, I mean, there is something that I was actually talking about recently with my wife, um, and this came about because we know people personally who are in the situation, right? Where it's like you saw when shutdown or lockdown happened, right? Where everybody, particularly in tech, had to work from home. You also saw interest rates drop significantly in the real estate market, and the and people buying houses like crazy. You saw a lot of people buy houses. People that live, say, in downtown Seattle.
Mhm.
I was one of them. Lived in downtown Seattle. Interest rates dropped. Found an opportunity to go buy a house outside of downtown Seattle. Right, realizing like I don't have to live downtown. In fact, there's nothing to do downtown anymore. The benefits and the value of living downtown don't exist because everything's shut down. I can now actually go buy a house,
with the
like
yard.
outside with a yard with a lot of space, pay the same amount that I was paying for rent and for mortgage, right? Like, so a lot of people go buy houses like out Central Washington, right? Like Marysville,
Mhm.
further north than that, and work for places like Amazon or other tech companies. Like now, what do? Right? Like they've got a home, they've got families now, right? Like
Yeah,
it's 4 or 5 years later, like they've got kids, they're
they're
established in
part
their
of that
communities now.
community.
Like they're like, okay, now you got to come back to work. Like
Yeah, I'm
that's a
guessing there's
significant
not very
change.
many six-figure jobs in Central Washington.
No, right, and it's like, okay, like, what are your options here? Like, how are companies handling that? Like,
Yeah,
that's what I'm really curious about. Like, they're like, I personally know people, that have purchased homes during or post COVID,
yeah.
um, because their employers allowed them to
And
work
it's like a
remotely.
lot of these employers actually encourage them to do that.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think the employers didn't really have a choice, right? And they're like, well, this is the reality. And I also think companies to stay competitive even once things open back up, like I think you had to have a hybrid and or remote option. I think there was a lot of leverage that was put back in the employees hands to say like, oh, I'm not going to work for a company that has me come to the office, right?
Yeah,
So companies had to follow suit. That's definitely changing, especially with Amazon saying you got to come back to work. The leverage is kind of, that pendulum has swung back the other way.
yeah.
Clearly you've seen with a lot of the layoffs, so those companies are still extraordinarily profitable, right? That the leverage is no longer in the employees' hands. So now the
I
employees are
think
just
another thing
like,
companies mess up too. Like a lot of companies, I think mess up where they try to do the hybrid. They let employees pick when they come back, right? Like
mhm,
so, half your team might be on Monday, half on Tuesday. So
mhm,
that defeats the purpose. For me, I think the perfect thing. Me, the perfect thing is like let people work they want to, but one day a week, make everyone come to work 1 day a week. Do all your meetings that day, all your
mhm.
collaboration that 1 day, right? And every other day, let's just let them work where they want to.
Yeah. Well, question here from corporate perspective, I sometimes like to play devil's advocate, right? Is if I'm a company and I have leased all this space
Yeah,
downtown,
that's my next question I was bringing up. Yeah,
yeah,
all this real
right,
estate,
right,
you're
right,
paying literally probably millions of dollars in real estate.
right.
It's like just emptiness.
Right. Like, do I shut parts of my office down? Do I keep it open,
Do you
right?
break
Or
the
do I
lease?
force everybody to come back, right? Like, I don't know what lease agreements look like, right?
Mhm.
But like, there are things that need to be considered from a corporate profitability perspective. Not
Yeah,
again, like I'm not a hardline corporate profit person necessarily, right? Like I, clearly work, a lot in that space, so I understand the value, but like I also understand like the reasons they have to make some of those decisions, and I think that needs to be considered as well. You know,
yeah.
um,
Are there any tech startups out there that you're working with that like really excites you?
I I'm still excited about the tech space. There are certain things in the tech community, particularly in Seattle, that I'm not really excited about. Right, like the things that like really hold my attention are more so uh, startups or companies that work in social impact space. Right, like if you have the ability to create positive impact in those communities that you operate within. Right, like um, there are some that are I'd rather not answer that question, because I don't want to leave organizations or companies out, um, that I know are doing good work. But there are a lot. I think Seattle's one thing I love about Seattle is it's a very innovative community, right? I think there are people that are innovative and looking to solve problems. I also do think like there's one thing about nonprofits that like I think maybe bothers me is that they all like to operate like nonprofits, like they were built in 1910s, right? There isn't a need to operate that way necessarily, right? Like you can be like the only difference between a nonprofit and a for profit is tax status, right? If you have a business model, you can run your business as any other company does. One of the major differences is you got to be public about what you do with the money that you earn, right? And I do feel like, there are again, there are social impact for-profit organizations that are doing great work that I don't think I think they think differently than a lot of nonprofits because they don't bound themselves by the red tape that they feel like they need to be bound by, right? So I appreciate the people that are innovating in that space.
All right, let me reroll the question then. If
Yeah.
you had $1 million, what tech startup would you invest in?
Wow. That's tough. Actually, I don't know. Like I think I started answering the question, by saying I started getting more like I'm more passionate about like social impact ventures than even a lot of tech startups. Say that like I've kind of taken my eye off like
Okay.
the tech startups in Seattle, right? Like I'm aware just because the work I even do with WTIA, I'm in just things that I'm naturally like passionate and curious about. It's just, like I just don't follow it nearly as closely as I have. There are startups that get referred to me often. I'll look into them and find out more about what they're doing. But like I don't know if there's a particular startup that like I'm like in the Seattle area that I'm like super interested in. Not to say that there aren't any interesting
Mhm.
startups here, right? But I'm just
Okay.
yeah.
So next, let's talk about diversity tech, right?
Mhm.
So I got involved in tech startups like maybe 2014, 2015, right?
Yeah.
Diversity in tech has always been a big thing, right?
Mhm.
And I could be wrong. There's all these initiatives like focus on it. But if you look at the stats, that's like the stats are getting any better, right? It's like the stats are actually might even be getting worse, right?
Mhm.
Why do you think that is, right?
I mean, candidly speaking, I think if you're going to focus on diversity, it means work. And I found that companies prioritize profitability, right? And if it's not something that they can like tangibly connect to profitability, then they'll say all the right things, but like, are they really going to do the right things, right? Like, are they really going to do the things that like are needed to change stuff, right? Like you saw 2020 happened, and companies made commitments to become diverse and to bring in consultants, DEI consultants, which I'll reference back to what I said earlier, that like consultants are there to provide advice. It's the company's job to listen to advice and take action, right? There's only so much a consultant can do, right? Some companies actually went and found somebody to, like they created a role for DEI, right? Like within HR or whatever other function in the business that, it was relevant for. Um, I've seen, those roles or people within those roles, talk about like just not being properly resourced, right? Like where it's like paid to do a job that's not funded like it needs to be, despite my ask, right? Not saying that's the same for every company, right? But I do think there's, a reality is like if a company doesn't see this initiative as something that's going to positively impact their bottom line, even immediately or in the future, probably not going to do much about it, right? Like the people that are making decisions aren't going to invest the time, the dollars that might truly be needed, right? So I think it's something that I think a lot of companies do because they feel like it's the right thing to do, in name, right? Or in the optics are important to the company's bottom line, right? Um, but the actual practice is something that like they might not be willing to invest
So
in.
you're talking about a performative versus actually doing real work then.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and, again, there are a lot of variables at play here too, right? There are a lot of systemic issues that maybe make it way more challenging for companies to become more diverse. But I do think, generally speaking, like in order to overcome any systemic issues that exist, like it's going to take work. It's take investment. It's going to take
I mean, because
focus.
all the stats
Yeah.
show the more diverse your team is, the more profit you make.
Sure. Yeah.
And no one disputes that.
Yep.
Everyone agrees to it, but still, like,
Yeah.
I might make this up. I think last year, like in the Bay Area, um, VC investment in black companies went from like 3% to 0.5%, like something like that, right? And it's like mind-boggling, right? That's in the business case, right? Yeah, to me, like you don't believe diversity at all, right? You don't care about it, but that's in a business case. You think more people would invest in it.
You should, right? But like, you know, think of the average CEO or like even a small medium sized business owner. It's like I've been doing this for a while and things have been working. You're asking me to change a process
That
that's
works for
worked so
you.
far
Yeah.
for me, right? And it's, you know, unfortunately something that like I see a lot of business owners or executives agree with. Like they acknowledge like there are hard facts like you mentioned, right? Like, you know, diverse companies perform better, period. Right. Um, but there I think it's the challenge of the work that it takes to become diverse that companies generally aren't really willing to invest in fully.
This was
Right.
crazy to me, right? I can't remember the name of the VC firm, but they had on their website, we want to increase the diverse, investment. We want to talk to more people.
Mhm.
I'm paraphrasing, like we want to invest in more diverse companies, more diverse people.
Mhm.
And then it says, um, we don't take cold emails. You need an introduction. Like, make it make sense.
Sure. Right.
Make it
Right.
make sense.
Right. Right.
Make that make
So
sense
if
for
you aren't
me.
already part of our network, you're not in, but
Yeah.
we want to become more diverse,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think it's like the fact that you're saying that you want to become more diverse acknowledges that you have a diversity problem,
Yeah.
right? But then saying that the only way in is to be part of our network means that you're not willing
Yeah.
to
So,
identify
so
or
basically
justify.
saying we have open door policy,
That's
but
interesting.
the
Yeah.
door's always closed.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, but I think that's a good example, right? Like it's like companies have a hard time like moving on to new practices, right? Like that's something that they probably already had. Like,
Yeah.
cool, you need to like introduction, like that's part of the core of who we are,
Yeah.
right? Like, but at the same time, like, yeah, we've acknowledged we have a diversity problem. We want to change that, but like this is an area that we're not going to change. Well, okay, like you said, make that make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let me ask you this question, right?
yeah,
So let's suppose there's two scenarios, right? Suppose you're a startup founder, right?
sure.
And you really want your let's say change that. Say you're a Hispanic female, right?
Hmm.
You have three Hispanic female friends, like really good at what you need to do, right?
Hmm.
Marketing, sales, tech, whatever. And the easy thing to do would be like hire these other, like bring on these other two or three Hispanic females to start your company, right?
Hmm.
So you do that and make the company successful at first, and then bring diversity on, or do you like do diversity from the beginning and maybe find people that maybe not as qualified, and because you're finding people who are not qualified, it takes you long to build a company. What do you think? What's some things people should do?
I think one, you got to be if you want to be a diverse company in the future, you got to care about diversity from the very beginning,
Mm.
right? Like, I mean, you got to think, um, you got to operate through that lens. I don't think it's hard to become diverse in environments that aren't naturally diverse without a significant element of intentionality. And you've got to be intentional a lot of the stuff that you do, right? Like the scenario that you just laid out. I mean, I think that's tough, right? It's kind of case by case basis, right? Like if you've got three qualified Hispanic women for the job, then bring them on, right? Um, right. I mean, I think that, and I guess diversity is subjective to, for me at least, the communities that you operate within, right? Like I always like to say, companies should be as diverse as the communities that they intend to serve or the communities that they operate within, right? Um, if you look at internal employee demographics and they don't match the areas that you came
Yeah,
from, like
yeah.
then maybe there's a problem, right?
Like how many companies say, "Man, we need to sell to Asian men over 55,"
Sure.
but there's no one in the company in that demographic.
That's a 55 or older Asian male, right?
Mhm.
Like you're like, how do you know what that demographic wants if you have nobody in the company that's designing for that demographic, right? Yeah, it's I don't know. It's there are. I mean, this is not to let companies off the hook. There are systemic issues at play, right? Like, and I think there's always going to be diversity, equity, equality pushback,
Yeah.
right? And oftentimes it is that, DEI is racist or reverse racism, right? One, that's not just about race. DEI is never just about race. But the realities are, the argument oftentimes is like, oh, take the most qualified person for the job, right? Which is, bottom line, makes sense. It's a very elementary, basic argument, but how do we define what is qualified, right?
Yeah. With that,
Do
I'm
we
a
look
firm,
at like
I'm a firm
education?
believer that you can find the best qualified person across the various demographics, various big different things, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you also have to consider there are a lot of individuals from various communities that have never really had the opportunity or haven't had a clear path to the opportunity
Yeah.
to make themselves qualified by your definition of qualified, right? Right, like it's baseline qualification that they have to have a degree from a prestigious university. Okay, cool. Like, how many people actually have a true clear path to that kind of education,
Yeah.
right? Like, yeah, again, like there are a lot of systemic issues that exist, that can be that act as disqualifiers for individuals that, like, if you're saying we're going to hire the most qualified individual, right? Again, how do you define qualified,
Yeah.
right? There are a lot of roles that I've seen within tech companies, sales as an example, right? Where, there's these tech companies that say you've got to have a college degree in order to get an interview.
You
Do
don't
you?
need a
Do
fucking
you? For
sales.
sales? Do
Yeah.
you?
No.
Do you? Like, no, like you need
No.
somebody with a little bit of grit and a little bit of fucking
Yeah.
hustle, right? Like somebody that can kind of
Some
adapt
mental
on the fly, right?
toughness.
Like mental toughness. And like, where do you find that from? You don't necessarily find that from, somebody who's been handheld from,
Yeah.
middle school to high school to college and has graduated and is now ready for a job, right? Like that's not necessarily the person that's going to be best for the job. I've seen it personally, you know, time and time again. Um, but again, it's like, like as a company, you get to define who you are. You get to define the term qualified. You get to make those decisions, right? Um, are you changing those things when you say that you become more diverse, right? So,
So tell me what about this, right? And this is one of my pet peeves, right? And
mm,
I'll probably get blasted for this,
mm,
but like I think a lot of people say the diversity or diverse, but they're really not, right? For example, it doesn't matter if you're like you're pro black, pro Hispanic, pro veteran, like
mm,
okay, be that, but don't be like I'm pro veteran for diversity. We only for like getting veterans job. Like
mhm.
so you're for veterans, but are you for diversity, right? Are you
Sure, right,
I
right,
think a lot of
right,
people like they like I'm pro immigration. I'm focused on getting immigrants job.
right.
But you're saying diverse, right?
Right, right. Yeah, and that's why I even said, like, the DEI isn't just about ethnicity, right? Like there are other elements that come into play, right? And so if you're intending to become diverse, you need to identify, the demographics of the communities that you're recruiting from, or demographics of the communities that you're selling to, or the community that you operate within, right? Like those are all things. And again, it's not just ethnicity. There are other things that are relevant to diversity, right? And it's like, yeah, but that kind of stuff takes work outside of the work that companies have done, right? Like they build their companies, they build their businesses around revenue models, right? These revenue models create profitability that pay salaries, and allow the company to continue to grow into various new markets that allow them to continue to generate revenue and pay salaries, right? So it's like, you're asking them to do things that like they've never had to do, they never had to understand. Like they've been able to be profitable companies without this new element that you're saying, that you should do. Even though they're saying they want to become more diverse, like, okay, but I also have to do a bunch of this other stuff in order to do that, right? But like I can't just focus on the things that have made me successful. Why can't I do that, right? So I think it is, there's significant pattern interruption and breaking of bad habits and acknowledgement of uh you know those bad habits and the impact on the communities or community members or the future profitability of your company, right? There are a lot of things that are like, a consultant or a DEI consultant can come in and preach, but it's on the companies to accept and actually do the work.
Yeah, I agree. Like a lot of people think diversity is like one, a color based, ethnicity based, or. But I was in Kirkland yesterday talking to a friend of mine. She's an Asian female star founder. Kirkland is like a lot of white people, and we're at a conference table across from us. These three white dudes were talking,
Mhm.
like my age in their 50s, 60s, and they were talking about how all of them came from Sweden like 10 years ago, and you look at it like you're not diverse, right? But actually, like, okay, you might be diverse because you came from Sweden 10 years ago, and just all those getting different things, right?
Sure.
I'm big with you too. Like you take three random people off the street, any three random people,
Mhm.
I believe I can prove how they're like the same and how they're diverse.
Mhm.
I think any group of people you can prove how they all have the same thing. Now, might be a stretch.
Sure.
You know,
Sure. Of course.
you're
Yeah.
all Americans. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
stretch. You
For
know,
sure. There are. I mean, again, I think one of the benefits of having a truly diverse team is perspective of experience, right? I think that's. I mean, that's. I don't think it's undeniable, right? And that experience oftentimes is tied to ethnicity, immigration status, um, you know, gender, gender identity, um, religion. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that go into this, right? Like, it's not just about ethnicity. Now, there are sets of challenges that exist with each one of these demographical markers, right? That are different, right? Like, there are challenges that it might be tougher for a black female than there is for a white male immigrant, right? Challenges might be, again, tougher. Um, there are challenges that are different from a gay white male than a Hispanic veteran, right? Like, so it's you can't paint DEI with such a broad brush, right? And I think
and I
people
think too
do
many
that.
people do.
Yeah, we do that
And
too.
we ain't talk about like the disabled community, right?
Right,
Like
right,
people blind, deaf, or
right. I mean
ACB.
those are demographical. Those are demographical segments that need to be considered when we're talking about DEI, right? Like those life experiences are perspectives that can help shape and add value to a company, right?
And so your staff company access to actually focuses on this, right?
Yeah, when
You
we
talk about
focus
that some.
primarily, and then we really the focus is on ensuring companies are as diverse as the companies or as the communities that they serve or they operate within, right? It's not necessarily like hey, you have you need more black people to hire, we got them, right? It's not just that, right? Like look at the demographics of the communities they operate within. Do you represent that as a company? No, cool, okay. Like, well, we have um our own proprietary ways of recruiting from talent pool that is as diverse, intentionally as diverse as communities that those companies operate within. Like that's kind of like our that's kind of that's our operating model, right? That's one of our differentiators is like we're able to integrate ourselves with community um, that truly represents these communities that companies want to operate within or want to sell to or want to hire from, right?
So how do you find your customers for access to?
There's a couple of unique ways, right? Like there's a standard way of marketing, standard way of referrals. There is, a large part of the work that we do is focused on community, right? Like we like to say, like we're community member candidate focused, right? I should mention Young Professionals in Seattle, which I started a long time ago, is now a 501(c)(3 and is a chapter of an organization, nationwide organization that focuses particularly on connecting community members with resources. Might be professional network, it might be, a job, it might be, introductions to other, it might be services of nonprofits that exist in your area. Um, a lot of the work that we do with Access is in service of YP community, right? Like we found a need within community members that participate in professional events. Oftentimes it is around careers. Like, we again we do the work through, a community with a through a community focused lens um, first. That is our priority, and I think that's what makes Access to different than any other staffing company or staffing companies that I've seen. Is that we're primarily focused on the candidate, not necessarily on generating revenue for companies, right?
So here in Seattle, too, like there's the 100,001 staffing and recruiting companies focused on diversity. What's make yours
I
different?
think, I mean, if I'm speaking candidly, I do think that, like you mentioned before, a lot of that's performative, right? I think again, a lot of staffing companies are a lot of companies are revenue driven, right? Like you follow money, you follow the dollars. The dollars, uh, the dollars have existed, or at least in perceivably in the DEI space, right? If you're not hiring for diversity, then you're going to get left out, right? So I think a lot of companies have to say they're doing that. There are a lot of companies that were created, you know, 2020 or thereafter. There are a lot of companies that have kind of pivoted their branding or their messaging around the things that they care about in that space that I've seen. Um, but are you truly doing that, right? You're doing that because the clients that generate revenue, that drive revenue for you, are saying they want this, right? Of course, you've got to fulfill a need. So you're going to say that you're going to do that. Like, how are you doing that? Question that I asked, that I would ask these companies.
Yeah, like, are you still going to University of Washington to recruit every
Well, yeah,
day
who are you recruiting from, right?
versus
Like
going like
how, like it's
HBCU or something?
sure,
Or
right? Like like and I think there are very like elementary ways to try to diversify the talent pool they recruit from, but like, are you focused on that, right? Or once companies decide that like diversity is no longer a care of mine,
Mhm,
like, is that going to be something that you do, or
mhm.
are you going to focus on the things that they tell you they want, right? Which I see a lot in business. I don't necessarily fault companies for that,
Yeah,
right? Like, you can't exist if you don't have a product that's relevant to an audience, right? Like,
yeah.
you can't, right? But you see a lot of companies that say that they focus on diversity, equity, inclusion. In my experience, it's because companies say that that's what they want.
Let me ask you this, right?
Yeah.
So let's suppose, to make it kind of simple, suppose like there's like a group of people in, like, we'll say downtown Seattle, downtown Bear, they're really doing really well,
Mm,
and they want to bring people up, right?
mhm,
So, and there's a group of, say, in South Seattle not doing well, economic disadvantage. Is it responsible people in downtown Seattle, down to Bellevue, to go down there and bring them up, or for the people at the bottom, so to speak, reach out for opportunities?
Well, I mean, I think that's a personal decision.
Mm,
Like, speaking for, in your example, the people in Bellevue, right? Like, if that's something that you care about and you want to do, then, identify avenues to be able to do that, right? I think there are avenues that exist that you can find so you can do that. Right? Like, I don't think that's the responsibility of anybody necessarily. Like, it's not on me to tell you what you're responsible for
mhm.
necessarily, right? Would it be nice? Sure, right? But again, like, we live in a society where we have, free thought. And if that's not something you want to spend your time doing, then you don't have to. Uh Now for the individual that you know, economically disadvantaged, asking if it's their responsibility to kind of pull themselves up by the bootstrap, right? Yeah, that's an, I guess, an age old phrase that you need to find ways to pull yourself up with the bootstrap. Like, but the realities are these. Kind of goes back to the systemic issues that are at play that maybe aren't not maybe, but are definitely not acknowledged enough. That like, how do you pull yourself up from the bootstrap if you've never seen it happen? If you don't have boots, if you don't have straps, right? If you've never been part of a network of individuals, where there are individuals who know how to do that, right? We are all creatures of habits. We are all a product of our environments. If I'm born into a society, like, if I'm born into, you know, East Detroit, and I've known nobody to go to college or to be successful, my definition of success is entirely different than somebody else's, right?
But when I was younger,
Yeah.
like high school, my dream was to be a manager of a Burger King.
Okay. Right, right.
To me, that was like, man, they make good money. I had, like,
Sure.
I was like, that's my goal right then.
Right, right. Again, like, I mean, I think we fail to realize and acknowledge the fact that we are all products of our environment, right? The average person does not move very far from where they were born,
No,
right?
I mean, the stats show most Americans, like, if they move, they might move at the most 2 hours away.
Right, right.
Like, no one's moving. Had a guy on the podcast recently, Charles Conner. He actually moved from Mississippi to Seattle maybe 5 years ago, right?
Sure.
Most people don't do that shit.
No, my mom moved from East Detroit to Seattle, right? Left everything she knew. For me to have similar opportunity
Mhm.
to others that didn't grow up in Detroit, right? Like, and like, I think it really does. Oftentimes, we fail to acknowledge the fact that it takes exceptional work for a lot of people to have a fair shot, even in today's America,
Mhm.
right? Like, it's very easy to say we all have equal opportunity.
Yeah, but do you
Sure,
really?
opportunities exist, but do we have access to opportunities?
Yeah.
Do we have knowledge of how to put ourselves in front of those opportunities? Like, there are a lot of things that, like, there are a lot of gaps between the individual and the opportunities that we all say exist, right?
Let me ask you this. Um, let's suppose you give your 14-year-old self, suppose you tell your 14-year-old self, learn these skills, learn these skills, and you'll be successful. Like for me, I would tell my 14-year-old self, any like young kid, I would tell them like, learn how to code,
Mhm.
learn how to speak publicly, and learn physics.
Mhm.
And there's a fourth one I can't think of right now. But yeah,
Yeah.
sales, oh, public speaking, sales, physics, and coding. That's the four I would tell people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would go even more basic than that, right? Like, both, which like I absolutely agree with all four of those, but like I think it really is like the value of establishing relationships, right?
Mm.
The value of removing fear um, from the naturally curious mind, right? Like I think curiosity is beaten out of us through school and through life, oftentimes, right?
Yeah, that's a 3 hour podcast on
For
itself.
sure, right? Like, which is tough, right? But I think if you're naturally curious, you can naturally ask questions. If you ask questions naturally, like there's a removal of fear, right? Like um, there's a lesson that I was taught by my mom and my stepdad, but also there's a line in hip hop, Stories B.I.G. that says, "Picture me being scared of
Mhm.
someone that breathes the same air as me."
Yeah,
Right? For me, it's like, why should I be afraid of asking for something
yeah,
from somebody because they're established, because they're an executive, because they're a CEO, right? Like, it's the removal of fear. It's like, that's a human being that's across from me. Like,
yeah,
why not ask them for something that I want, that I
yeah.
know, something that I'm unclear of, right? Like, that's curiosity, but it's also the removal of fear.
One thing I like wish I would learn earlier in life, like the fact that like no one gives a fuck about you. Like a lot of time people in their life, like especially younger days, oh, they're thinking this about me. They look at me like they're in their own fucking head, right?
Hmm.
They think the same about you. What is Jason thinking about me? What am I thinking about me, right?
Right.
And the sooner you like get rid of that construct, the better your life
And
is.
that's kind of like where again is like I think it's like as you get older, you stop caring about what people think of you, right? But like you're young, you care only about what people think about you, right?
Yeah,
Like that's one thing I would love to tell my 14-year-old self is like, who cares what you
like do
do?
the weird
Be
thing.
you. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
you're 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 great. And you're going to become great if you actually
like good thing. Like
continue down your
you
path.
going outside dressed like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like
This is what I want. This is what I
yeah.
like, right? Like I don't. Yeah. Well, what I enjoy, what I like, shouldn't be predicated on the things that you enjoy, and like, right?
But yeah, that's like that self doubt stuff, right? Too. So,
Mhm.
how do you deal with imposter syndrome?
I think one, I think there's a level of self awareness that needs to exist in order to avoid that, right? Like I think it's just also self acceptance. I mean, it's tough, right? Like and um maybe I'll talk about this through maybe the lens of a person of color that's fitting into communities that are dominated by particular say ethnicity, right? Like getting into tech or advising or tech advising as a black male, your success, if you consider success monetary, your success is tied to your ability to sell yourself to clients, right? And oftentimes I think people look for examples of from those who are already successful in doing something. So I think the it can be the norm to conform to what you see work, right? Which fact means that you embody imposter syndrome in order to achieve the success that you think you want to achieve, right? And I do think there's something there's a value in being able to work um and being able to exist as your true self. That's tough. I think, right? Like it's really easy to say imposter syndrome is bad, don't do it, right? But I think, you know, for those that intend to be successful, maybe struggle to be successful, struggle to find the identity they need to take on in order to achieve success that as they've seen, there's a there's a this innate feeling that you need to be somebody maybe that you're not. Um, so which I get, right? Like it's oftentimes referred to in the African American community as code switching, right? Right? Like there's a way to talk and engage in a corporate environment that's different than you do with your friends, right? Like you put on a different face sometimes in these environments because you feel like, like you're not going to be accepted as your true self in certain environments, right? Like, and I do think everybody, regardless of race, ethnicity, background, has to do that or does that to some extent, right? I say all that to say I don't know particularly how to avoid imposter syndrome. I do know it's more difficult for some than others. I think that needs to be acknowledged. Um, I think the realities are, I think we can all perform the best we are able or comfortable showing up as the truest version of ourselves. Um, and if I had a solution for that, I would absolutely share, but I don't.
So I suffered that too, but this one thing helped me with it, right? So, do you know you know who Suni Lee is?
I don't believe so.
So she's a Olympic gymnastics person,
Okay.
and so in 2020 the Olympics, right? Of course, Simone Biles, they'll go whatever.
Mm,
So Simone Biles dropped out because mental health issues,
right.
whatever. And so everyone thought Simone Biles was going to win. So
Mm,
it feels wide open. This young lady, Suni Lee, won the gold medal overall Olympic gold medalist, right? Like the
okay.
best Olympic, best female gymnast in the 2020 Olympics, right?
Yeah.
She was destroyed by imposter syndrome because her mind only reason she won because Simone Biles wasn't there.
Mm,
And when I read that story, said she did, and afterwards, like she got really depressed, right? I don't deserve this.
yeah.
I'm thinking, and people are like, you're the fucking Olympic gold medalist, right? But in
Right.
mine, I only
Yeah.
won it because someone was dropped out. People are
Right.
like, even if she was there, you at least you would still won second. You might compete it, right?
Hmm.
I'm thinking, man, if the Olympic gold medalist has imposter syndrome, like, okay, maybe I need to relook this, right?
Sure.
Like,
Right.
okay, like
Right.
you're like the
Right.
top of the world at your fucking craft, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
that kind of like I still suffer. That kind of when I suffer, I go always back to that story, like how Suni Lake suffered from like the best Olympic gold medalist female 20 Olympics. Find an excuse that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So I'm like that kind of like helps me out some.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean it is. I mean, I think that it speaks to the rap lyric I said earlier, right? Like, you know, we're all human beings,
Hmm.
right? Like, doesn't matter where you are in life, professionally, um, we're human beings. We suffer from a lot of the same things,
Yeah,
right? No matter your background, right? Yeah, yeah. Stories like that are kind of inspiring. You
yeah,
realize that, like, okay, it's not just me. I'm not.
yeah,
It's not just like it's not just a me thing. It's not just my circumstance.
yeah.
These are things that like a lot of us have to overcome, right? Um, yeah, yeah.
So is YP communities YP group, is that the same association or they do two different things?
YP communities.
Ain't YP group.
YP group is just my like a very non-creative uh um name of a company that I do my consulting work through. Um,
Okay.
it was an extension of Young Professionals for Seattle, right? So, like, again, like I mentioned before, the story I said, like, companies were looking to sponsor
Yeah.
and find ways to put like their message, their brand in front of a particular audience. I started having to like operate through a lens that said like we're going to protect these email addresses, but I can start advising or help you deliver a similar message through your own channels. Um, in a in a pinch, I basically had to create an LLC and figure out how to do that. So it's just like YP Group, and I've never changed it. So yeah, that's more so my consulting business or the business
Okay.
I do my consulting through. YP Communities is the parent organization, nonprofit organization for young professionals of Seattle and some other chapters across the U.S.
And so when did you start YP communities? It's been around for a while, right?
Yeah, so Young Professionals of Seattle, it's first iteration, 2011, if I'm right. I should know this off the top. I'm pretty sure it's 2011. So yeah, quite some time, right? Going on 14 years, which is crazy. YP Communities was established just before the pandemic as a nonprofit parent organization, which we're still doing a lot of foundational work in expanding. So yeah, it's been around for quite a bit.
So what's the intent of YP communities? Is how people network, bring communities together.
To boil it down or to distill it down, it really is about connecting community members to resources, right? Now, obviously, you can define community members, which we very much do, and define resources, which we very much do. But it really is like acting as that bridge to things that people need. And there's a curated way that we do so. Um, you know, very much parallel to say the work that we do with access, right? It's just a very specific part of what YP community is designed to do, right? Like some of those resources are jobs, connecting with companies, connecting with mentors, connecting with professional networks. Um, we as YP communities as an organization, our job really is to um, really build that ecosystem, right? Companies, nonprofits, schools, universities, and then identify community members. Like there are those who organically identify as young professionals, and those that maybe don't. Right? We intentionally don't define young or professional. Right? Um, I think that's more so to drive our own internal um, processes around who we do work for. Right? Realistically, it's we 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 create. There's intentionality behind how we target or market towards the quote unquote young professional, right? Because if we don't, the community that we end up serving is going to look a lot like the community that these companies are hiring from, right? Those that already kind of self-identify as this is the place for me. I'm gonna walk into this door, I'll find the resources I need. How do we speak to the individual that has been, economically marginalized, right? Marginalized community members, right? And help them identify, a path, a career path, right? Like, are there tech companies that do hire those that haven't had an opportunity to get a college degree for certain roles? Is there an opportunity for us to carve a clear path into a job at that, right? Which is, part of the secret sauce and how we, you know, help companies become diverse, right? Is our dedicated focus through, organizations like YP Communities or Young Professionals in Seattle, our various chapters on, educating community members on opportunities that exist, becoming kind of becoming an advocate and or like an agent really for them.
And y'all do like monthly events, correct?
We do. I mean, we've historically always done a happy hour every single month, end of the month, last Tuesday of the month. I think that changes depending on whether it's like December, November for holidays, right? That's like the easiest low barrier to entry for community members, low effort for an organizational oversight to put together type event that we do. I mean, we focus on four primary event pillars, right? One is social, which includes like the networking event or like a tasting event or a cooking event, things that are social in nature. Obviously, impact, which is focused around volunteerism. Um, can we partner with a nonprofit within the community and provide aggravated community impact there? Professional development, which focus around clearly professional development, right? Mentorship, workshops, um, certification partners that we connect with, and we connect individuals with, upskilling for jobs, and then health and wellness is more recent event programming vertical that we've established. Well, all these things are all driven by um, data. We do a lot of surveying, identifying on a community by community basis things that are most important um, to individuals that are participating in the work that we do. Um, so through that, we've been able to identify like four main areas that we show up within communities, right? So like our goal really is to you know, allow individuals to find the resources, tools, and make impact that, they can by doing the things that they're already excited about doing, right? So, like, get an idea of the things that you want to participate. Cool. How do we integrate resources, tools, and the ability for you to make impact in your community by doing those things, right? A lot of details in the margins there, but generally speaking, that's how we operate.
And y'all did an event, I think, in July 4th weekend at Seafair. Y'all had like was selling like a beer and stuff like that, like for fundraising. How
Yeah,
that turn out?
that was more so a fundraiser for our own organization. So
Mm.
we were, lucky enough to be able to partner with Seafair where we staffed beer gardens. Our organization were able to staff beer gardens and Seafair donated the tips to the Seattle organization. Um, so that was, I mean, it was less of an event. It was more so just like work done by our team to be able to raise funds for ourselves, right? We our program design is done intentionally to remove as many barriers to entry as possible, which means we don't charge community members. right? Like we don't intend to generate revenue from individuals that we try to serve. So we look at opportunities like that to, cover our overhead, our expenses. Um, we are, in the middle of forming some revenue models, all right? Like, historically we've been supported through sponsorship, which, through a lot of work have found that works, it's fine, it can cover overhead, but, like, that doesn't create the ability for an organization like us to scale, right? Like, you've gotta have forecastable revenue, and also you've gotta be able to provide or identify, you know, what particular value it is for somebody that wants to sponsor, right? Like, what are you looking for, right? Companies, of course, will say, "Oh, I wanna give to the community," but is that really what they want, right? Like, if there's not value, then that support doesn't exist in a scalable fashion. So we are in the middle of, I mean, we're actually at like very close to launching a revenue model that's built more around partnership
Mhm.
and membership for companies that truly want to support the initiatives that we do within the community that provide tangible value to, the things that are important to them as well. One of those things is going to be staffing, right? Like, so kind of the access to staffing model integrated into the services that we provide for companies, right? But like all the services that we, the, the revenue model that's established for YP communities that's being rolled out is directly focused on providing resource for community members, but by removing costs of entry for individuals, um, and allowing it really to be supported by the companies that are integrated into this community, right? So we really are like on the community member side, we're focused on like making sure that you have access to resources, you have access to each other, access to the tools you need to, empower yourself to help introduce you to the community and, set you on a career trajectory that maybe you didn't know existed, right? On the corporate side, it really is like, how do we best integrate you within the communities that you operate within, right? Are your priorities around hiring? Cool, we have a mechanism to help you do that, right? Are your priorities around corporate social responsibility? We have a mechanism that can help you do that, right? Um, so yeah, again, a lot of the work is primarily focused on developing community while we're rolling out a business model to support the community. That's reliant upon the participation of companies that exist in those communities.
So I don't know if you track this, but you find like people who join or people that already been in Seattle for a while, or like more like people coming to Seattle and finding opportunities to network.
It's a little bit of both, right? And it like varies depending on like chapter, region, city, right? Like Seattle has been, as pretty fast growing city. Like not a lot of people that live in Seattle were born or grew up in
It-
Seattle, right? Like it's kind of rare when you find
It's
something here.
very rare,
Yeah.
very rare.
So there's a lot of people, and we found that there is the value to a lot of community members is like being able to introduce them to the community. Period. Right. Like, of course, there are people within every community, and there will be continually be those people that like are, you know, very much looking for resources. How do I develop professionally? Like, you know, how do I expand my own personal professional network? But like, we found that there are a lot of people, particularly in the Seattle area, in the last say 10 years or so, that are like, I'm new here.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like, I came here because I got a job here at Amazon or Microsoft, but
Mhm.
like, I don't know anybody,
Mhm.
right? You know what I mean? So they're trying to get introduced to the city. They're trying to
Yeah,
find um, you know, they're people. They're trying to find something to do outside of work, right? Like,
yeah. One thing you guys should do, 'cause I know you see it on TikTok, right? I'm on TikTok too much,
mhm,
and recently my For You page is like all these like black men and women on my For You page talking
mhm,
about I'm in Seattle now, and where the black people at? Where's this at? I'm here lost, right? Come help me out.
sure, for
There's
sure.
like 10, 20, 30 of them on my favorite page. Like
Mhm.
people like, what can I do, right?
I mean, there are organizations out here, right? Like the collective has existed for a while. I heavily recommend that, right? Um, Again, I mean, Seattle is it's I guess historically not diverse, or you can say it's oddly diverse, right? Like, I mean,
Like it
there are a
is,
lot
but
of
it's not
community.
right.
Yeah, it is, but it's not. Like there are a lot of communities that like we're heavily diverse that are less now, right? Due to gentrification. There are a lot of professionals, black professionals that have moved to Seattle that are also looking for like, okay, where's the diversity, right? Like it's I don't know.
So is it like diverse or is it like diverse in your economic status, right?
I mean, I think it's both,
Yeah.
right? Like I think lack of diversity in general leads to that lack of diversity in
Mhm.
economic status, right? I don't know. I think it's so I've got a friend that you know dedicates a lot of his time to creating spaces for the Black community in the Seattle area, right? He moved here from outside of Seattle, like a lot of people have. And one of the things that he told me is that there are a lot of people that like live here that leave Seattle oftentimes to go on vacation to actually go hang out, right? Like they don't hang out in Seattle. That's an anecdotal experience, right? I've seen that on some level, being Black and having a pretty diverse circle of friends that I'm friends with here. But yeah, I mean, I think it's diversity exists in Seattle, but it's also very segregated,
Yeah.
right? Um, I don't know. It's an interesting place.
And so you're a graduate from University of Washington, correct?
My Husky diehard
What's up with your
forever.
what's up with your football
I
team?
don't want to talk about it. We got a game
Are they
today
like
too.
4-4 or something? Or
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of change happening right now. Obviously, losing our coach.
yeah,
I think we had two returning starters, offense and defense. Right.
yeah.
Like, I mean, it's gonna happen. I think going into the season. I'm a
Do you have football tickets to college game to the games?
no, I get tickets occasionally. When I was
Yeah,
a kid, my step dad's
yeah.
parents had family had season tickets,
Yeah,
so
I
I
actually
could
haven't
go
been to a
to.
game. I went to a game when they played it at that one year when they were like redoing the stadium.
Yep.
I saw the game one time at Lumen Field one
Okay,
time,
got it.
but
Yep.
I saw my bucket list to see a game back at the actual the stadium.
Fun. It gets loud when it's packed, right? I think that's Seattle for you, but it's also the stadium's designed to be loud. No, man, I'm a diehard. Uh, Rough season coming off of last season for sure.
Yeah,
We'll see. We'll see.
you're a follow of all the Husky sports or just football?
Generally speaking, I mean, like I'm a follower of sports that like obviously I participated in, so
Yeah.
like very much into basketball, football,
So
Husky
I guess
sports.
you're not
So
following the Washington Huskies 6-and-I swimming team.
no, not necessarily. No, I'm not. But like I will cheer them on if they're playing, for sure. No, I'm a Husky first.
Mhm.
A fan of football and basketball
Yeah.
second. So yeah, I'm a supporter.
So are you a type of Washington Husky person where if someone applied for you and you saw Washington State Cougar on like resume, just throw the shit away?
Oddly enough, my wife's a cougar.
Oh, is she? Okay.
Yeah, and my cousin, who's basically like my brother, we grew up together. We're only a few weeks apart in age.
Okay.
He's a cougar as well.
Oh wow.
So I've grown up. I've been around people close to people who are cougars. I judge them
Yeah,
to their
pretty
face,
good.
not behind their back, of course. It's funny. I joke about this a lot with them, particularly that like I don't cheer against the Cougars,
Yeah.
right? Like we kind of look at them as like little brothers. Like
Yeah.
they hate us
Hmm.
and they get angry with us. We don't really dislike them, but we also kind of disregard them,
Yeah.
right? It's a joke, of course, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I really dislike the Ducks. I'm not an
The
Oregon
Oregon
Duck fan.
Ducks.
Oh my god.
That's the enemy, so to
It's like
speak.
the Cougars look at the Huskies as the enemy. The
Yeah.
Huskies look at the Ducks as the enemy, right? Again, that's not to be dismissive of Cougars. It's all fun
Yeah.
and games when we talk, like that. But like, I'm not a Duck fan at all.
And so talk about this. I don't think people realize how of a great university Washington is, right? I know they have like one of the top computer science programs, one of the top human centered design programs, top business programs. Like it's
Healthcare,
everything is top notch.
yeah,
People don't realize like how good that school
right.
is.
Well, I mean, I think that's also, I mean, they're in part responsible for a lot of the growth that we've seen in the city too, particularly with like the young professional age. Like there are a lot of people that move here for school. And there are a lot of tech companies that move here because of the talent that comes out of, say, like the school of computer science, right? So yeah, I mean, it's absolutely like I think you look at rankings, academic rankings of schools across the world, and UW always ranks in like top 5 of public schools, right? Like they rank oftentimes top 10 of all schools, which include Ivy League schools across the world, right? Like I mean, it's clearly I'm a Husky and I'm biased, right? But like there's it's it, it legitimately a great academic school. It is.
Like you're not gonna apply on Monday and get accepted on Tuesday when you're in Washington, right?
No, it's I mean, back even when I was applying, it was extraordinarily competitive
It's
to get
yeah,
into the
real
school.
competitive.
Running joke again, like I don't hate the Cougars, but I love reminding my wife of this and that uh the one thing that a Husky and Cougar have in common is they both applied to get into UW, which she loves to tell me that she didn't apply to get into UW because she didn't want to go to UW. She
Oh
wanted to go to
man, that's
ASU.
funny.
Running joke, of course. But no, I mean
And
University
then
of Washington has been
and part two of the joke:
okay.
no one who accepted the University of Washington applied to Washington State.
Right. Right. But that I mean, obviously it's a joke, but like, it's if we're speaking about
That's a
the
damn good joke.
quality of,
That's a damn
academics at
good
University of
joke.
Washington, I think it applies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So for your company access to, you want to talk about some? Can you go more detail, like how you started the company, what you're focused on now? What do you see the future of your company being for access to?
Yeah, so I actually started the company. Well, I should say I didn't start the company, right? I got invited to be a partner in the company through contact that Rublin, and who actually introduced me to Dre, who kind of started the idea around the company. So the company exists as not necessarily just a staffing company. We can get into like some of the details there a little bit later. But like my the way I found even Rublin was through a lot of the work of say young professionals in Seattle. I think I mentioned to you before, being certainly curious on corporate side, like why are companies looking to work or give money to this organization, right? Like what's important to them, and it was always, you know, brand recognition, marketing, or hiring. How do I hire from this database of people? So for me, I'm like, I'm not gonna become a recruiter. That's, I can't attempt to be great at a whole bunch of things, right? Like that, but like, it would make sense that we somehow integrated a mechanism that connected people to jobs because this is what companies are looking for. Knowing that that wasn't something that I was going to do myself, I was always kind of like looking like, who does this? Who can we partner with? Who can we work with that does this, exclusively? Rublin and I had actually been connected on Twitter for a while, just never really even met in person. And I think I can't remember exactly how the meeting came about. Maybe ran into each other at an event. Can't remember. We ended up doing coffee, talking a little bit about the work that she was doing in recruiting. So she was very much in recruiting with an organization. So we talked a little bit about young professionals in Seattle, where things were going, where some of the gaps were that I saw in my work, some of the stuff that she was doing, things that she saw important. Um, Great human being, and that let's just stay connected and see how things worked out. He ended up showing up to a young professionals event, panel discussion with an executive on mentorship or something like that. He introduced me to Dre. Dre had this concept for kind of a staffing model that was very much tied to sports. Really, the concept was connecting, uh, meeting people where they were, right? Connecting them with resources by meeting them where they were, which was a great idea. So, long story short, I ended up kind of joining as more of an advisor of the organization of the company. And then realized, like, for me, there were so many parallels with the stuff I was already doing, the things that I cared about, the work that we were doing with YP communities, that we all just kind of started like working across organizations, and the organizations kind of ended up blending together, right? So that's really how I got into the work with access to. Again, like my work isn't done in recruiting, but like in kind of coming on as an advisor, really understanding what that business looked like, right? And this was you know, while I was doing consulting and advising with clients, um, you know, consistently. So, I walked into that situation with my kind of consulting advisory lens on, where I was like, I really need to understand this market, who's your target client, what are their needs, what is your existing operating model, what's the most or more effective operating model, right? So like took quite a bit of work. Um, Silver lining of COVID and the lockdown is that like, I got to really focus on that business, because was I met Ray and was kind of invited on as an advisor, partner of that company 2019. So everything shut down shortly thereafter. Well, I got to have kind of a laser focus on the world of helping companies become diverse, how to be able to build that business model out effectively. So that's a lot of the work that we did. We spent time doing, and like I like to say, like I mean, we were fully operating business, and currently are, but like a lot of the work that we were doing, I think through the pandemic, and even coming out of it, for me, I think it was a lot of like testing. pushing buttons, pulling levers, seeing what works best, like how to communicate best with companies. That market is entirely dynamic. There are periods of time where everybody's looking to hire, and there are periods of times where people are laying people off. Right? Like, how do you create a sustainable business in that industry that can survive like these peaks and valleys? Right? Were things I was really curious about, and definitely got to go through a lot of those. From 2020 forward. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's that's how I got involved.
So same question for YP communities. Like how they got started, what your focus is now, what do you see as a future vision for YP community?
Started because my background is in law, and I thought I wanted to be an attorney until turned into a full time job and realized that like that's not at all what I wanted to do with my time in my life. Was relatively young when I came to that realization and was told I needed to go find out a way to network. I was like, "What the fuck does that mean? Like, who network with who? Like what?" So I true story, Googled networking in Seattle, and there were some groups that popped up that were very specific to industry, or there were some groups that popped up that had a cost associated with it. Didn't really seem like anything that I really wanted to do, right? Like I think I told you even before this started that I'm kind of like I'm an antisocial extrovert. There's part of me that like I can be very talkative. Like I can talk for hours with somebody about the right topics, but there's a bit of anxiety sometimes when it comes time to like go inject myself into a room full of people that are energetic and want your attention. So trying to figure out, okay, what does networking look like? What does it mean? Realized really quickly there was nothing really in Seattle that made a lot of sense to me. So long story short, decided, young, ambitious, like I could start something on my own. So I did, snowballed. I ended up finding my way into tech. I met a tech recruiter at one of those events for the organization. So yeah, it grew. And again, like I said, like, being extraordinarily curious, like, why are people showing up? Like, we were doing a monthly happy hour. Literally, it was just happy hour. We intentionally said no name tags, no sales pitches, show up, have a drink. Like, why are people showing up? We're getting like 100, 150 people at like, per event. Like, what are you looking for? Like, how did you find us? What do you want? Like, why are you here? Right. Like, so constantly surveying, trying to identify like, you know, one, like why this is seemingly working. And then like what is there an opportunity to provide something, right? Like, what are people actually looking for? And then, again, being curious on the corporate side, once companies started reaching out, like, hey, we want to sponsor. It's like, well, I didn't build this as a business. What do you sponsor? What? Like, what does that mean to you? Realizing that, like, there was a very apparent gap between individuals that were joining this organization, participating, and willingly giving their contact information to us, and the companies that were trying to integrate themselves into that community as well. And yeah, I think I am just sometimes I think problematic. Like I'm a problem solver. Like I feel like I see a problem and I want to dive into it and solve it. I want to figure it out myself. So right, like again, full time employed, but I'm also like, how do I solve this problem? There's a puzzle that can be put together, and there's a bunch of pieces that I'm identifying. Like, how do we make this work? So it really was. I mean, over time, again, doing this part time, with people, team members that would come and go, realizing that there was an opportunity to really continue to make an impact and really start identifying, like, okay, here are the people that are showing up. But why are other people not showing up? Right? Like, why are some of these events not nearly as diverse as um, I think they should be? Um, so we really started focusing on, I think, kind of around the pandemic time too. It's like, well, actually, it was largely around the pandemic. Before the pandemic, I realized that there was a problem. And the problem was that there was a lack of diversity and participation in some of the stuff that we were trying to do, right? Like we really identified, you know, earlier on that, our value to the communities that we serve is that we had to as kind of a connector, as a platform to connect people, right? But then realizing that like, are we really connecting everybody? We have those happy hours, move all barriers to entry with the intentions of being inclusive. But if we're not intentional about what inclusivity looks like or what diversity looks like, and are we really servicing the community? Or are we servicing a segment of the community? Right. So we realized, and I think the shutdown provided a silver lining in that respect as well. We actually got to start looking at data and information, like who are we targeting, how are we targeting, who's responding, who's not responding, right? What's important to us? Like, do we exist just to exist, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we need to be intentional about the work that we're doing, especially as we're like, okay, we we want to make ourselves a 501(c)(3), and I think, well, not I think, like it largely we did that because we wanted to make sure that we were focused on community, we weren't focused on revenue. Right. 501(c)(3), we're not doing the things the companies wanted us to do. We're just like, okay, we've been bootstrapped from the very beginning. Like it's been self-funded or we were funded by, we used to do like an annual anniversary party. Started to slightly do away with that because we charged ticket price for that. Didn't feel good about that after a certain point in time, especially the pandemic coming out of that. We're like, it's kind of exclusive, right? Like if we're using that as fundraisers, like we should be looking at companies that like really want to be part of what we're doing, to support what we're doing. But yeah, no, I mean, I think the pandemic really helped force, or I don't even think force, like it really gave us the capacity to focus on ensuring that we were intentional with everything that we did. Every event type was intentional. Campaigns around event types were intentional, right? The end goal about everything that we did, like developing a mission, a vision, kind of a north star, and making sure that all of our activities aligned with that. Um, Intentionality, right? Like I think that helped us. I mean, it definitely helped us become better servants to the community and thereby, you know, better partners to the companies that truly intend on being value adds to the community. Right.
So, how do you protect your community members, right? 'Cause I'm sure you get a lot of sponsor people want to sponsor, right? How do you make sure this sponsor is like? How do you build them? Make sure they're gonna kind of scam your people. Like, how do you like do all that kind of stuff, right?
Well, like we integrate the companies in a fairly templated fashion, right? Like, and it all is around like the programming that we've developed. Some of our programming templated out, right? So it's like a company wants to be a corporate member, they pay an annual fee to do so. What that gives them, really, I mean, kind of part is like a logo, description, a link on our website, right? But we also integrate them into a lot of the event programming we do, right? There's a heavy element of mentorship through all of our programming. That's vitally important. Um, Companies are then required to provide, depending on the size of the company, mentors to the community that have dedicated mentor hours, right? So I'm an individual that works for Starbucks headquarters and I work in graphic design, right? And I've got 6 or 7 years of experience. Starbucks is a community, say a community or corporate member of YP Community. They support us on an annual basis. This senior level graphic designer has allocated, 10 mentorship hours per year with the organization, which means they can participate in panel discussions about, things that are topical. So we have a team that kind of like looks through our database of mentors, through our corporate members, and says, cool, we can put together a panel on this topic. They'll say it's marketing, but we've got like, a senior graphic designer at Starbucks, right? So like Starbucks then is able to allocate, say, 2 mentorship hours to the organization through the event that they do, right? They also can have, through calendar technology that we're kind of working on right now, set up a profile within our website that we're developing right now that says, here are the hours that I'm available to do like a one-on-one mentorship for anybody that's interested in getting into graphic design or trying to figure out what it looks like to work at Amazon, right? So we find avenues for these corporate members or these companies to integrate themselves into the community, but in ways that we've already kind of determined through surveying that's relevant to community members, right? So it's not just like we can host an event at Starbucks and they're going to sell you all their coffee and then pitch you on, applying for a job here,
Mhm.
as a barista or at HQ, right? Like we're not really doing because say Starbucks pays us, right? Like this is hypothetical, generally speaking, right? Because they pay us, we're not going to do exactly what they ask. We have a templated model and how you integrate into that as a platform.
Can you talk about what you're doing for WTIA right now?
Yeah, so I'm on the advisory board, startup advisory board, right? So they have cohorts that join. We pause. I can use the restroom real quick.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. Hold
You got to use a key.
It's right over
Yeah, yeah.
Appreciate it.
So WTIA,
WTIA, yeah. So advisory board, startup advisory board for them. I joined 2020, I believe, 2021. So WTIA, Washington Technology Industry Association. Um, they host cohorts of startups that go through um, these sessions effectively, connect them with tools, resources, you know, advice, opportunities to be able to kind of pitch their business, right? Like going through a lot of the activities that startups are going to need in order to, find funding and move their company level, right? So, I mean, we do kind of startup assessments, right? So, like, once companies apply, we go through, like, assess, I guess where they stand, a couple of metrics that we use to take a look at them, and then once they go through the um, cohort is identified, we step in, listen to pitches, um, kind of assume these areas of, I guess, expertise, and can kind of step in as advisors, provide advice, right? Like WTIA also hosts workshops for a lot of these startups, right? So, if I'm a, expert in marketing or revenue strategy, then I have the ability, or sometimes I can be tapped to host a workshop for, some of these companies, or step in and provide advice, right? There's a, cohort member or cohort graduate that's, needs some help in, a campaign that they're looking to launch. I can get an email that says, "Hey, Ahmad, you mind setting aside some time to kind of talk to this founder or this company or this, this team about some of these initiatives and maybe provide advice," right? So it's still, it is an avenue for me, um, you know, into the tech space in Washington, right? Like it's heavily Seattle centric, but they're doing a lot of work to make sure that, they're accessible, say in at least Eastern Washington, right? Because it is Washington Technology Industry
yeah,
Association, right?
yeah, not
Not just
Seattle,
Seattle,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So yeah, like I've been involved for quite a bit. I think I kind of like it's almost like I'm on reserve of for if there's a need, falls kind of within my wheelhouse.
So what's your take on this, right? So it's like in Seattle, there's WTIA startup Seattle Startup Grind coming back up, Founders Live, New Tech Northwest, Founders Institute, Startup 425, Startup Haven. There's all these Washington Startup Hall. There's all these startup organizations, but it's like none of them like really collaborate. It's like all in their silo, right? Why do
Yeah,
you think that
and I think
is?
that's
That
we talked about this a little bit earlier too,
yeah,
right?
like
It's
the
just
nonprofit thing.
yeah, it's like the nonprofit thing or people that are designed to like serve popular needs
Mhm.
within a particular region, right? Like we're very tech heavy here, so there are a lot of people with ideas around startups, how to start startups. I mean, WTI has been around for decades. I mean, like they service, the industry for quite some time, right? Not to say that, well, I'm not here to judge the importance or value of any of these organizations to the community necessarily, right? But like, I mean, I think, and I say this often, I really mean it. There's way more competition than necessary, in not just the startup space, but just these spaces in general, right? But, there is where we live in a capitalistic market, where you have a business like ideally the cream rises to the crop, right? Like you got the strongest business model, right, and it forces you to continue to innovate. Um, but yeah, I mean, there is a lot of competition. I've seen and I've heard, anecdotally, of course, that like the space can be confusing for somebody that's looking for the resources. Like what's going on? Like there's 3 events tonight that are all kind of focused on tech, but like none of these organizations that are hosting the events are talking to each other, right? There's been a lot of people within the community that are trying to somehow solve for that. Like seen several iterations of this tech community calendar, so everybody knows what's going on with each other. That have or like Slack channels that have been developed around that, so we can make sure that we're working together. But like that those are they always seem to be short lived. I don't know. We'll see.
That's not,
But
I think it's crazy too. Like Of course, the weather in Seattle from like we'll say November to February is not the best, right?
Sure.
But it's like in Seattle taking me, everyone like crams their tech events in the summer events, right? You have like a year events in like 2 or 3 months period, and then the rest of the months like nothing goes on, you
I
know.
know. I mean, that's especially. I mean, for one, like events are hard to do. Like, it's not a really a
People don't
sustainable
realize that
thing.
too. Like events
N-
don't happen. It's like
No,
there's a lot of shit goes
a
into it.
lot that goes into an
It's
event.
not
Like,
easy to do an event.
yeah, no, the amount of time, oftentimes money that goes into it, right? And like, for what's the impact, right?
Mhm.
Like, I find a lot with people that are like coordinator running events, like I've got energy to do this event because I have an idea, and then they do the event, and they have no idea what to do post event,
Yeah,
right? Like, how to like further that
take
idea,
advantage of it.
like
You're
well, yeah,
saying.
what is the value to you of hosting the event other than just being an event host,
Mhm.
right? So it's like, I feel like a lot of that stuff seems very like it all seems fragmented, right? Like disjointed from, it's a bunch of like just floating disjointed events and event
Yeah.
organizations, or organizations that are hosting events. And oftentimes they're not designed around calendar. They're designed around personal convenience or
Yeah.
personal initiative, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like, oh, summertime, I've got a whole bunch of energy. I should host an event now, right? Like, I mean, yeah, I don't know, and like I don't. It's not, it's not to say that people should stop just hosting events. Host, like, do what you want, right? But, that reality does, create some confusion around those that are just trying to understand the industry or introduce themselves to the startup industry, or I'm an entrepreneur that wants to network here. I just don't know where to start, right? Like, that's not just a Seattle thing. Again, Seattle is a very tech centric city,
Mhm.
so you're gonna see a lot of tech focused stuff happening here, right? But it's noisy. It's gonna be noisy. You know what I mean? Like, and I think the alternative is like there's like a centralized tech hub that dictates what happens when and where, and like I don't know if we necessarily want that to happen,
Mhm.
right? But um no, it's like I don't know, I don't I have a hard time saying that I'm an insider, right? So I say, like, from the outside looking in, it's always been entertaining, but like I'm very much, I guess, part of the tech space in Seattle still. And even to me it seems it can be very muddy and noisy, you know.
So, Ahmad, is there anything I should ask you that I didn't, or anything else you want to talk about?
I don't know. I can talk forever about whatever, but yeah, I don't know. Um, no, I think that's it. I mean, the YP communities. I should talk maybe even a little bit more about that. Like, that is where I'm spending probably 95% of my time now. Right, is focused on establishing a scalable model for the organization to be able to sustain. Right, and a lot of that really is creating the revenue model while ensuring there's intentionality around the community members that we serve. So right now, we're actually undergoing a pretty significant market research project. Um, we've got it's credible to me right now, but right now we've got a team of about close to 50 full time, part time, volunteer, intern, interns working in various divisions of the organization and team. We have a team really of interns that are and they're all grad students, or they've recently graduated from master's programs across the U.S. Um, Focus is around data science, data analytics, financial analysis. So a pretty extensive research project with about 20 of these individuals across the U.S. on really kind of like the one, identifying who the community members are, what their needs are, who the community members are that, like, are maybe missed or marginalized, identifying the corporate landscape, right? Like, what companies exist within communities, what companies are servicing their communities, and what challenges those companies are having, identifying trends in the hiring market. I- Really important work for our organization, but also important work for, a lot of the organizations that are or companies that are intending to serve um, their communities. And by serve, I mean, if they're selling a product, if they're hiring, like if they're operating within those areas, they need to have an understanding of who exists there, and what the needs are. So I'm really excited about the work. I mean, it's exhausting. I've been interviewing and onboarding constantly. Feels like daily. Which again, it's good. Met some, like, really smart and talented individuals along the way. And it's also really encouraging to meet this many people that are really passionate about like the mission and vision of our organization and wanting to contribute and participate in this. Out of this work, we're actually uh, maybe too soon to announce, but we're also like developing a bit of a program, more so, to be able to recruit individuals to give them hands-on training, upskilling, and education certification in various industry things, right? Like be able to kind of like do work, mission-driven work, but also be able to introduce them through the end of this program to companies that are looking to hire. It's fairly new, but it really is just like it's a layer that we put on top of the work that we're already doing anyways. It really is kind of an additive to the individuals that are participating as interns that we can really connect them to opportunities to jobs. Um, but yeah, it's exciting work. It's exhausting, but for the right reasons. Because it's stuff that like I want to continue to contribute to, right? So like I spend more time doing this work than I would in a typical 9 to 5, or even in like you know the role of a entrepreneur running a business, right? Like this is you know weekends, nights, you know, get to go to sleep, pull out my laptop and do some more stuff. It's because stuff that I'm passionate about. So, exciting.
So, Ma, can you give us your social media so people can reach out to you,
Yeah,
or any other way you want people to reach out to
I
you?
mean, I think LinkedIn is my preferred way to like connect to me. Like, as much work as I do in marketing, like I don't touch my personal accounts.
Mhm.
But LinkedIn is the best place to reach out to me. I don't know my exact LinkedIn
Yeah, I'll
URL,
put
but
the
it's
link in there.
Ahmad Corner. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can find it. Yeah, definitely share. Reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah,
And before we get out of here, can you give us any last minute advice or wisdom or anything you want to talk about?
man. Um, Not a person of few words very often. Um, but I mean, I really it's stay curious, right? Like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to approach a person and ask anything that you're curious about. But stay curious.
Ahmad, thanks for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And to our listeners, thank you for your time as well. And remember to be great every day.